How are you? How are you? Now we are doing a darker screen, silent reading book today, video today, and I will be reading A Pirate's Life for Tea by Rebecca Thorne. A-P-I-R-A-T-E-S. Pirate's Life, L-I-F-E 444-T. A Pirate's Life for Tea by Rebecca Thorne. Okay, feel free to close your eyes, and have a really good night. Sleep well. Good night. Sleep well. Chapter 16. Raina. The rest of the night, the growth and office helped every obstacle to navigate her. It makes back up a little ways upstream, but it should be a safe place to look at the night. The moon was starting to wane, and she meant that the shining silver lit dimming very slowly with every passing day, and at the end of the stars and two brilliant sort of the head were glowing brighter and brighter, and the radiant landed so that I could they dragged the one in Emmeline from the captain's quarters for their first meal as a crew. Squirrel lived in between them like a wild squirrel. She was soft open and a tiny piece of their she'd softened some wine water and light them into perfection, and there they could have put carrots into light dish that Raina produced 3 bottles of precious gold of wine with the adults up to themselves. Soon they were laughing and chatting like they didn't know each other all their lives. Elaine was fascinated with Raina, thinking on her escapades. The queen with the I'm shocked at you. But Raina was so excited of being ashamed of their past and compared with somebody who'd seen him first and ordered and was constantly afraid of the wine and drinking in her right lips and in their tongue. Raina leaned over to the dramatically violated this word and reasoned after Queen's and fled. They was in ballasted of cut to escape, but no one had to go to kill it. Raina took the new mouth, but the wine aware that Joe was listening to it, so dropping at the time and two lines slumped back into his seat. Let the conversation progress. After a while, Raina ran up knocking him out mildly and Riker, and then never get his world with the lead and should wild with this world with the other. I'm from Malia, the noble and raised by the fairly game tested with carpenters, no, but then the name ladder. After all, there had been for me, Valley bought another glass of wine, and she seemed to prefer. Before the red smoke, wine then. Her smile grew wider and wider, the more she drank with her, something to the video took her to look at her, the modest whisper. Persian folk later, there ran out ripe city as some sort of bicycles I've ever seen at the strange. My favorite was the fainted magical bits and old civilizations. We've never found a dragon remains in our jungle. Incredible latest squirrel risked away up, laid it up on her shoulder, and it will bring on everyone. Just one week clear off the table. We moved out of the music Serena ran as the head of the table, laughed boisterously. Now that she was able to relax, she drank with the best of them and purchased a bottle of amber liquid from the island sold for it. Of course, this music fatal failed us to the pirated drags and dancing buddies and priests until his damn tonight, and he got me on that. They kept the night by the fatal into his own they tell it rolled her as squirrel against the rain of the takes on him so the bait. Squirrel had cut it up all these days, and the gathering itself is just a small space underneath the cocoa world with another room fitted to tiny cut it up at the battles that seemed to have been made of paper flowers out and took it along with the wooden shelves that look at the backless that beat the metal that part of the coast against the place with the water screwed down by the island. Raina said that any dishes in a large washing container and realized the squirrel was staring at us, slowly scowling. She found a packet, something wrong. She thought it was on the deck, but Raina was not that worried about it. But anything on him for that, there's some good back. Squirrel said, I agree. Raina said, it's suspicious now. I don't give me that to join up from the pawn that there fled west up the woods and deal the birds. You can up to it. And squirrels are so hard and rusting. I know. Man in the mind's good. I know what you've done. Raina had spent many nights in the dark, shivering under the members of the building. And anyone and about the families and the purpose of the options. Quarters a few minutes later, you and I went in and I by that bucket of culture smelling tea and Raina went to water the boil of some of the land and some of the shit of the tiny cloth bags to steep. Before she missed the new leaf times and day missed the copper left times and day and the copper kettle she don't water she missed because they were tables and key and they shall eat them until the news remembered. Well, I love wine said but there was something about a nice cup of tea. I love tea but there is something about it to literally from the other's personal stash. That's running quickly, but the bags of the magic identity. But for the honey and sugar about the cupping, but she didn't want to see girl anymore tonight. Once anybody had a steaming cup there in his little back into a jet, and like deeply and unrelated not a man in the like nice bread for the gallon, special ordered and delicious, quiet moments passed to slip to pass, and all three of them seemed content with my mind left the look at the club. As it announced under the cloaks that was stolen tea, finally Serena stood to Bill. I didn't know what lady struck shame she left a bit of work here and there, drags full of the fuel and she by the next page and stood on the inside. They joined their side instead of the ships they played, which the sailors screamed to fly under a different flag. When my hands came, I figured why the hell's not Serena chuckled and out in Bill and Reeps. We got this tea and know what you're doing. I think I'm not every day, but pirates in the sea and I just Serena decided what things to be different. My family moved from the lathe when I was a kid and I wanted to know angry about when I spent against coming through myself that I was moved to black to lathe from my family lied about it that was my path and she laughed but the sun was dark and bitter. I finally got my chance, not the family land but that was good. My job and me a married match of soil so far and landed that shipping under river but to the river front I didn't lay all of my profits out kind during it rolled. The pirate shouted, yeah well turns out I'm as bad at pumping as everything else in life and surprise I'm on and reclaimed. But a pirate doesn't make sense. Gorilla is spoke quick little eyebrows Serena finished it. I heard he led a ship but I was either looking for help and was stealing from him since then. It seemed like an obvious choice. The alarm and then all in one that was gone and the three of them I don't want somebody had got the three of them in that long table back to the captain's quarters, started his tail, water a bit of it, a bit of it together good night and Serena climbing down. Making all this small thing Bill clapped her on the shoulder so squirrel pull you aside. Just want to know you mean my family we judge by actions not history and so far you seem okay to me. Opening kind smile and climbed into her make a above Joe was fast asleep right up had her landed getting comfortable above her in bed. Maybe one day she'd believe that. Where are we delivering this food? Joe speaking into the great so the next morning at the bucket shifted from the gloomy rain which the sailing a month again and let the distance was against the current any slower than regular to start rowing or of course I assumed it was a major boat. Raina was somewhat accustomed to running on a few hours of sleep at a Serena apparently forgot I've been out that she kept into crew now. And you took some and a bit of it provided a grim style that was a mental list of places that it needed anybody higher up and so he asked and he was beginning to tug on to the position and spared a glance at this at that below Serena browed his furrowed and she obeyed a deep breath of thought. Typically I'd try to focus on the back outside of town since they usually was off the lack of the commonly unity around their own space and they usually have a few people to complain if they're not going if they're just the that Rainy said Alan probably doesn't give them much mind. Serena nodded stepping lightly to home she hated it for a back basically there was a cluster of homes on one of the islands nearby and the only place they had a little gross but they can't survive on the berries I suppose they'd appreciate it and they stop and now Serena took another sip of tea grinning stood back towards the crew and she seemed to be having a night on the dinner than normal pirating. Are you lot ready to see the back end of that way? If they're pirate you don't seem to do much actual pirate. Joe muttered Bill snapped at his fingers at them rolled at his eyes scared. You're hardly an infinite of a pirate. Joe clamped their mouth shut. Catching Larry searching on the lid on the great spoon. Serena chuckled but Serena didn't miss the lip screen. You know what you like that? You like this problem? She raised her voice. Rango, you'll know where the color is island is about half a day's off. Remember this to think as current rate looked to his shoulder suggesting what the hell make a little on the bell. Sounds we need the wind we can get is into your button at the Argonaut to the distress and it's you'd be handy, yeah. She would indeed remain replied dryly. Sailing ship was another personal job but Raina wasn't needed. With their handling and the applications Raina supervising and Bill and other kids scoring. Across the lines and not into the mind Raina was left little to do. She spent the time along the ships early watching the distant shoreline appear invaded the fog even if it was smattering of rain drop until the clouds were heavily overhead. While they joined him munching on buttered biscuit she wore a light cloak in this weather seemingly easy despite the cold temperature and she just at the water below them. The river's beautiful isn't it? Albeit the river's shockingly clear and murkier and further absorbed but this showed everything on the surface that faded into a black footage that he was part and reckless muttered laughing. He's lovely we don't have anything like this and going to have no one anything like this. The river's the beast of its own. He asked anyone to tell you the folklore of it happened as he was created. Raina turned slightly for the face value of it. Undivided attention. Probably smiled. They say the land was barren. It isn't empty of anything. A magic that settled just sunk into the ground and consumed and with their stone's history and their interest in her, and she hadn't seen that in person, but she'd always seemed not that Ganther worshipped a literal rock. What happened? And I said a bit by brothers. They say plus stuff fall from the sky and cling to all of their land at the crest of the mountains, the light of light, and if it shook them very well, and the mages flew north to check, and they found that the stone of seeing birch from the center of the canyon grandma, what a pulled from the very ground, and that all the move had water, they looked what it got south, but it covered it so it didn't. The night region with the flooded, that's how they found the stone of seeing. Raina asked Count, they had never mentioned it anything like this before. Granted, Count, they didn't pay much attention to the stone unless it wanted something. They didn't really bother her about it to live with her now, she said, shrugging. All that was so long ago that it could only rely on biased retellings anyway, but if there was a grain of truth that Raina was interested in, the magic group wasn't published. You know, the night about that to the rumour. It was an official origin of the stone, but that's the rumour. Valley smoke listening to the rains against the ships, the railing pushed the water, the flooring of their ship, and a view of us bulking out of the waves, and thought passed on their brain. Once it lifted sharply to the water, it didn't catch anything, but Raina admired the effort. They said that this room's the most magical ley line. Raina said, pull the ram, and that's why maybe from this railing. All I know is that it's nothing good or whether it will be respected one way or another, but there's something horrid about it that I couldn't think that I see it about Raina. My name's Travel, my name travelling, and I've never found anyone better than Raina laughed. Good thing, reckon feels the same way. Oh yes, it really short up to the helm, leaving Raina to her thoughts. After another hour, they pulled into a small dock at all of the islands, and like the other islands, which were mountainous and intimidating, while up was not was flat. The friendly wife, the night of the northern edge, a fairly friendly cove. The village nest was just small, just a few stops. The closest deep into the trees and the fishing boats nearby. Several locksmiths milled around the pier, watching Bill and his kids fold the sails, squinting into the gloom as Father and Raina was dropping anchor. We better not stay long. Raina's very minimum, but sorry, now this is the perfect place for an ambush. Little plants, constables, pluckily, etc. wrapped up that. Throwing the ground, the water, and then up to bed. Father and his loaded gang blanket had landed on the dock with it going about, and sorry, what is no time strolling down at Garrison. What have you made out of it? The full-bodied man stepped off the pirate, let his shock, so let's you waste each other to gasp to pull it back, but you had yourself again, kid. Sorry, his fingers feathered on the man in our armor, and they found my but with mouth and trust me. Garrison squinted it up and must have been satisfied with their overall state. He chuckled, he was suddenly making good waves. The constabilities, the lords of Raina about you ranting up. It's the door of the serves him right. Serves them all right. Garrison replied, blaming love angels. The dust attached, gang back and got to the morning man. There's a return and flipped delicately, third in their bed, and glanced at them in the back of Red Rock of Doon's Raina's face, and she after had them gladly just let me introduce to my crew. She went through the names, and everybody waved in turn. Raina introduced which and around a minute through her soul. And she didn't miss the superstition of the flush of a squirrel's face that her name, but she didn't do well, but it was Serena Matthew and Ireland was what mattered. Your upgraded painting pays well, then pirating pays well, then the Garrison world. I already told you I'm an entrepreneur, not a pirate. Serena ranked. Oh, my mistake, Aaron said, swallowing a lump, stuffing his hands in his pockets. Well, was Serena the entrepreneur? I'm assuming you've ever brought something or you want something. Serena clapped his arm. We've brought something. I remember you telling me that things were getting low, and shaping up to be a cold bitter like a huge grates of weight. Garrison stared for a moment, and then his eyes shook and red. He was shiny, blinked a few times, and again glued his throat. Ah, wait, well, of course. We had to take what you have. How much? Free for your discretion. We can be so discreet. Confessed Garrison jabbed his eyes alight by his tail and snorted. Garrison flattered, seemed pleased and one with him. So if we can't accept it, wait for free, Serena. Now Serena thought it both of us just go without your folk, you'd have starved last season. Without your folk, I'd have starved last season. I told you I wouldn't forget it. I just needed a crew to get to my preparations first. At that, her crew shifted something between them, solidified. Raina watched it happen. It was subtle, a few smiles, some shed looks, but in the magical moment, the night for the sail became less than a shock and more of a cause. Raina's arm prickled and she swallowed and put that last sudden confident throat out that was the camaraderie she missed from the Queen's clutch. I really think she might again, even when Squirrel avoided again, shifting awkwardly, she said, we're happy to help. Serena's held to Garrison's gate. In fact, like you, what I'm doing quite like this, except the way you feel ready to share some of your to share some of your halberries. The last part he said was a joke, and it discounted love from the Garrison and the other villages. Of course, anything you need, he cleared his throat. But how about you folks stay for dinner? We'll have it plenty. We'll have plenty to share. Thanks to you. Serena glanced at the crew, assessing her approval, and Raina's almost told Serena how they needed to keep moving, but it was starting to rain again, and the sun was beginning to set in, and a short while it'd be too dark to identify how the ship put the dock anyway, but they could sense it was thick in the morning. Serena and Bill have arrived at the same conclusion because she swept her arms aside. We'd love to. Let's enjoy the night, shall we? And Garrison was instructed some sort of victim around at the disgrace of the ship, and several other people ushered Serena screwed towards the buildings alongside the shoreline, and Raina couldn't argue with the warmth inside her chest. Maybe painting was the pirating wasn't the villain it seemed. Maybe pirating wasn't the villain it seemed. Bobby, chapter 17. Everything was gone. Bobby couldn't stop from the bandage from repeating, and it stayed a sickening spiral into the dramatic, but the discount apprentice whispered, no, acting something she'd accepted to prove herself, and ultimately proved that she wasn't good enough. Her family would be next, and what kind of a sheriff wanted to fail the constable as a daughter, and then Serena, the antagonist of the story, would now but decided to put blatantly in place everything Bobby was. first time in her life, and Poppy felt a little seasick as she clutched the fence of the railing and then staring at the water below it as he nodded all at once from the front of the mountain. They craned her neck to see Poppy. You're not going to puke, are you? The river went like that. It helpful as always. A surge of fury swept through her. The reason she didn't snap was because it was the Alcador and she didn't want to ride. Landing at the main Alcador list of values. Can we not at all? The request came out vaguely miserable. Yeah, they contemplated it. They took it, considering we've been sailing half the night. And you've spent it moping. I'm not feeling particularly benevolent. I think we should talk. In fact, I think you should yell, scream, fight. Either easy for her to say there's nothing to fight for. Everything is gone. Sophia took the hand and something smacked Poppy from behind. The situation flushed. Since she flushed down her back and she shook more than actual pain, but it made her check her feet. It looked as if it towards the invisible opponent, except the position out of they were obviously alone in the center of the massive river. The deck was wet. She just slapped me with water. Maybe they crossed their arms. Talk to me. That was shitty. Aren't you angry? Yes, she was so angry. It submitted her chest and it lit her soul on fire. She wanted to scream and cry and to do things, but it wasn't too late. Not there things, but it was too late. And all this episode accomplished nothing. Like else, the words sort of huge whippet of water from the river circling the boat. It seemed like the nursing itself wasn't drinking out this spite. This ridiculous. All she wanted was a bit of space to compartmentalize it. I thought, and she didn't feel like much like to ask, but the Alcador was now scowling like she demanded the fucking world. What do you want? What do you want me to say? Poppy snapped, then clamped her mouth shut. The next sentence came out quieter. My name is Yonder now. The Serena's never going to stop breaking their law, and the constables now finally catch her. Poppy got her look at it. You told me yourself it's nothing good around them. The boat bobbed along the currents. We watched splashed into the distance. And Poppy caught a flight glimpse of the dolphins, Venus and drove again, and the world seemed to settle around it. Them like heavy lucky, and they leaned against the boat's railing. So, what are you going to do about it? So simple. Poppy allowed a groan sinking to the boat's wooden deck. She pulled out her head and answered and muttered, I don't know, and another slap of water smacked her in the head, and this one didn't pull back. Lazy tendrils of river water slid down her shirt, causing her when she pulled to her feet, she came face to face with the Alcador. The mage narrowed her eyes. Get mad. I don't. Damn it, Poppy, you've been overleased her since this began. You've just fired. Your best friend is you've been dragged up and down the river. You've been fired. Yeah, they stepped closer, decided into Poppy's space. Now get mad. I'm already mad. Poppy snarled the suddenness of it, and a wry smile of tilting heads against these lips encouraging and for the first time in the world. Poppy felt the fury consume her. Skin burned out, and they were not alone on the star-stamped river. Everything had gone to the pipefuls already, so why not? I've never even wanted this. You know what? Being a fucking leaning casually against the helm's wooden post and the water writhing around it, then calmed as Poppy placed her smooth before her flesh clenched, shouting at the sky. My mother was already at the sheriff. Looking terrible. I wanted to do her proud, and I didn't even let myself consider other options. I'd have thought I'd love to be a seamstress or a carpenter instead. I'd have loved to be a little bit of patrolling on the inside of Poppy tucked her fingers into the tight spur. Her felt good, a bit of a release. The tension of her brain and the volume was climbing before Serena lost her mind. I thought I was helping. That's how I reasoned it away. Committed to do the greater good, but I couldn't believe that. Good is relative. Good, said it drearily. No shit, Poppy hissed. Fuck this, the constables are, and all of them else that I've never done the guts to do. Maybe I will be a bird. Consider, I wonder if Serena's hiring, and she laughed again, hysterically. Eventually it died down. Eventually the silence took over, filling the space between the warmth of the hot cocoa of the cold day and her skin. Her skin cooled. She suddenly didn't want to cry or scream anymore. Actually, Poppy felt good, scared this much. Sometimes we all need a release. I haven't yelled like that in years. Poppy messaged her face with her two hands. Some script usually below is usually enough. Well, we're all out of pillows, but an empty river is a good substitute. Kathy strode forward and grabbing her shoulders every time. It's for a reason. Something better always shows up. But it was the plans in the meantime justified. Poppy laughed. But the anger in the meantime is completely justified. Wake chuckle now, but maybe it is time to be. I could just Kathy shrugged. Maybe I think you're destined for more. Satisfaction spread through Poppy's soul. It was nice to hear somebody believe in her, especially after all of this exhaustion had tugged at her chest now, and her eyes were burning, and she swallowed a yawn. I think I'd like it up. Can we do that? Can we do shifts? We don't need to. The wind okay was on course. The second sentence with a warning tone, and the gust of wind swirled around them as if to concur. Then a magical display as she forced a smile. Looking at these rifle put us to about the boat. They left us sleeping pads. Let's both get some shadow where we can. Okay, Poppy took out from it, laid it on the deck again. They settled the adjacent to her, facing the sky with satisfied sigh. Overhead, the stars gleamed paint on the inky canvas. Poppy leaned back on herself, raising her hands under her head. Another splash further down the river, possibly another dolphin, but maybe just a fish. But otherwise, the river was calm. A gentle lapping of water against the side of the boat was almost soothing now at the distance. The silhouette of an owl cut across the sky. Poppy ventured. The mage was ended up asleep already. Poppy hesitated, keeping her eyes straight on the stars. Thanks, I know you and Raina didn't want to spend a time to season like this, but I'm glad you're here. I always find myself exactly where I need to be, even if my expectations were different. Kathy sounded amused. All that to say, I am too. You're surprisingly good company when you aren't stressed about things you can't control. Poppy snorted, and for once it didn't make herself pick that apart. I'll keep that in mind. Maybe Kathy was right. Maybe now finally she could stop with the pretense to sleep behind the professional constable and the perfect little the blackest cluster friend. She could just be herself. It sounded nice. Rocking gracefully, Poppy drifted to sleep, drifted to sleep. Chapter 18. Serena. Koala Island had one specific spot that Serena adored. Required a hike out of the village to biking through a barely worn path. Climbing a gentle incline and finally emerging through the pine trees into the rocky outcropping at the edge of the bay, but though it unfolded before it was worth it. A stunning view of the ridge dotted with the distant islands and a short man yelling around in the meadows licking its tail. The morning fog was lighter today and more of a mist, and added cozy golden light into everything. Haze, the rocks at the feet were hexagon-shaped, oddly geometrical, and Serena perched to the side of one of them, wringing her fingers alongside of the soft moss that grew between the stones. Her crew would be sleeping for a while, but this was a nice way to wake up, a nice place to calm her anxiety. Everything would be fine, it had to be fine, but Serena's arm hadn't stopped throbbing all night, and even redoing the bandaging this morning was a task, and it was a visceral reminder of Raina had discussed earlier. Steps would have to be taken, decisions made. How far was she willing to go to disrupt the outlaws' rule? Serena didn't have somebody who had approached until they cleared the throat behind her. She yelped. Pivoting violently and nearly tipped up over the edge of the outing, Raina raised two steaming mugs in her hands, clearly amused. Should I have made more noise? When I approached, she asked. Serena coughed up and nearly coughed to cover up her laugh. Yes, always, her eyes lingered on the bench. She hadn't realised how badly she'd wanted a wake-up beverage until Raina arrived. Where they missed that day after last night, it certainly isn't like Serena snorted, taking one of the mugs. Raina sat beside her of mint and cacao. She'd clearly mixed a bit of honey, and the result of Serena's mouth was watering, and she could have called on her egg. The morning chill. So she sipped quickly to save the days. Is everything okay? Raina asked after a moment. Why wouldn't everything be okay? Things are great, better than great. I find the efficient putting around it sounded low, although even to her own ears. That's why you want, that is what you wanted. That is what you wanted. Raina traced the rim of her manga, staring at the Raina Brett sort of horrified for something inspirational to talk about the difference between wants and needs. Instead, Raina pivoted. Do sea serpents really swim in this river? The question took Serena by so much surprise that she laughed. What brought that on? I saw a gift shop in Nilo that had carved sea serpents, and they looked like dragons, so I got curious. Serena tilted her head. Are they real, or another part of folklore? Serena had forgotten that some people didn't grow up here. They couldn't keep the amusement from my voice. They're definitely real. My parents used to sit along the riverbank and skip stones to call them from the deep, and they like fish. They love elk. They like fish and they love elk, Serena said. You really haven't seen one. Afraid I'm size wide. Scots knew how big they are. Serena studied the river, gauging size at least as big as our ship. Sometimes twice that size, but they're pretty mild. Dangerous to fish and dolphins and the like, but they don't really care about humans, and they live at the bottom of the river. How deep? Raina craned her head over the edge of the outcropping deep, but then you can imagine. Serena chuckled. If the river wasn't deep, we would have trouble sailing on it. Raina hummed an affirmation. Just going to get the base over the river's surface. Amazing. I'll see if I can find one. I'll see if I can find one. She said, I live near there. One lived near there, but Serena didn't really want to go back there, but she couldn't look at Viviana in the eyes right now. I'm not aware that how she'd left things with Bobby, since silence fell over them again, and she'd sipped a tea, basking in the morning until still watching the rising sun colour the mist of brilliant gold. After a moment, Raina tilted her head. How did you arrive in Koala at the first time? You seem to be a good friend. Who are the people there? Serena's cheesecake burned and cheesecake. Serena's cheeks burned and she cleared her throat. That is kind of ridiculous. Turns out pirating is not that easy. I had a couple of rough escapes, but I really didn't apply my attacks. But I move at night, watch for ships left unattended, that kind of thing. Smart tactics. Should have been smarter to try them sooner. Serena set her mug down on another flat-ish rock and then tucked the sleeve of her uninjured arm. A fig strode along the nose, scarred through martyr skin. One of the constables got lucky yet, and I was bleeding pretty badly. I realised I wouldn't make it to Nilo. Serena analysed the scar, pressed various grins and helped you. They all did. They gave me food and water and medical help, but no one asked any questions. Serena swallowed, letting her sleeve drop again. Four constables arrived while I was recovering and took half their food supply. Half. Garrison was still insisted I stay until I'd fully recovered. Raina's lips tilted to their good folk. As to most of the people in this river, our community is an easy thing to forget in a big city like Polyurogel, but the Nisian River needs something different, and they couldn't stay away. I'm sure Raina finished her tea, then set her empty mug nearby. She was leaning back on her palms, a picture of relaxation. You're doing something right. You're aware of that, correct? I'm aware I'm breaking every rule, Serena paused, lowering her voice, and now if I mess up, this will get her to do. Raina smiled slightly, and it didn't have her sword this morning, but somehow still seemed professional, cunning, ruthless. Serena hadn't met a Queen's Guard before, but Raina was everything she expected. Any true leader takes on that responsibility, but you are doing something important, and it is natural for people to follow you. That is a good thing. Raina said her jaw, kicking her legs aimlessly. I wasn't really thinking that far ahead. Now is the time to start. I bet you have a feeling you'll be just fine. Raina pushed her feet, stretching the newfound sunlight. Daily there was scattered the clouds, which meant less cover sailing over the river, but pretty day overall. We should probably head back before the crew awakes. What's our next stop, Captain? Continue sailing north. Might as well, a lot of shipments go through Oslo. I think we can hit a couple of vessels there and restock again. There's a few other locations that might need. Raina was smiling. Serena got off the feeling self-conscious. What? Nothing. It's just like when you talk like that, it sounds like you were born to be a pirate. Raina winked, retrieving her mug and offering it. Take Serena's warmth spread through Serena's veins. Somebody like Raina approved of her work. Maybe she wasn't so far off after all. Serena pushed to her feet, dusting herself off. It was a nice sunrise, but they had work to do. You're right. Serena smiled, pleased. Thanks for the reminder. Anytime. Raina grinned, and together they headed back to the village. The village. Chapter 19. Raina. Asquala Island faded into the distance. An eerie feeling settled in Raina's gut. Maybe it was the fact that the river was clear, which meant that they were creeping along at a slowly in full view of the silhouette, the shoreline between islands. Maybe it was the fact that spirits were high and the crew was loud. Maybe it was just a premonition, learned from years of combat. Either way, Raina was unsettled. So how do you slicing your foot off? Darlene asked. They'd claimed astern of the ship at a practice in simply because Darlene had asked for sword fighting lessons with little else to do while the Nod for Sale crept north. Raina cleared an area and was letting teenager let her sword fight. Darlene held it like one might an axe, squinting at the sunlight reflected off the oiled blade. Sun. Raina glanced at the shoreline, which had just come back into view, and the islands put behind them. The river was narrowing again, and it must be near Alon's estate. And though they were walking the western bank to avoid it, no sign of an enemy, but that didn't mean when Raina felt this way. Our proper footwork, treating the sword with the deadly weapon it is. Raina pulled her attention back to Darlene, forcing a smile, keeping the blade pointed up. Unless you're moving into an attack and sheathing it, a blade should be parallel with the ground or higher. She stepped behind Darlene, adjusting her grip, nudging her feet into a more stable stance. How does that feel? Darlene grinned fiercely. Like I need my own sword, not a chance. Pope called from the crow's nest, and he sounded distracted. You're no fun. Called up to him. That could be my future. Maybe I'm destined to be a hang-on kid. Bill Stone statistically sliced to his daughter, and they whistled softly to her at the hum. You see that? Yep. And she swept up Raina's chest. She knew it without thinking. She left Darlene with the sword, taking their steps up. The dapper led back 2 at a time. Serena and Ranko were pressed against the railing, squinting through the trees. What is it? Raina asked. Maybe nothing. Ranko hesitated, leaning over to the derailleur to squint at the river, but it's basically eyesight so it might be enough to see the sea hauling them north, but it looks like several ships anchored around this bend at their side. Serena whipped out their spyglass, squinting through the trees. Raina made one. Need a spyglass to identify the problem because Ranko noticed so she could see 2 distinct shapes lurking in the shadows behind the trees and 2 more drifting off into the river's center. A max of ship sizes that all looked different. Indicating she was sub 100 cannons. She was fairly sure had 100 cannons. Raina followed. You think there are perhaps? It wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me considering we stole from Ireland 2 days ago. Serena scowled, snapping a spyglass shut up blockade. I can't believe Bobby set up a fucking blockade. Can't believe this is Bobby. Raina replied quietly. Her tone made the pirate flinch. Serena began to pace, running her hand through her long, unruly hair. Her arm was still bandaged and it seemed painful to lift, and she didn't bode well. Okay, so a blockade, which means Ireland would ask for a surrender. You had what his precious ship at the bottom of the Nessian, right? Depends on how angry he is. Raina rolled her arms, loosening up for a fight against the 4 ships. She couldn't do much without Chianti in fear. The accountants acknowledged that she might not be able to keep her promise. If it come to the crew safe, will keep herself safe. We know we have plenty of coin to buy a new ship. He might be decided to make a statement. Serena glanced at Rancor, then at Darlene in the lower deck, sewing at the swinging at Raina's sword with a mock pirate practice drill. Sweat glanced, though claimed on the captain's brow. She turned back to the blockade. Then we turned around. There are plenty of places we can go. We don't have to visit Oslo anytime soon. It was a fair point and a far safer plan. Eventually, Diana Allen would catch up. But as for today, it seemed like the smart idea. It gave Raina time to find Chianti too, and Diana Allen would think twice about attacking the ship with the Arcantor on board. I think that's a flash of light from one of the ships. There was just enough time to scream, "Get down!" Before the communicating satellites through the air, the wood shattered above their heads in a deafening explosion, and hailings pressed in every direction as the air-splitting check of the cannon and fire finally caught up, and a clunk of one of their booms spun into the water. The high-pitched whine of their ears receded, and Raina registered some screaming. Darlene, she dropped the sword, covering her head. We're under attack, Serena shouted, taking command with impressive speed. Darlene, get below decks. Bill Rango, turn around now. That is around now, Burley. Farley burst out from below decks, drawing a dark arrow into a bun. Who's attacking there? Raina pulled the plugged skyglass out of Serena's hands. Locating the ship emerging from a small inlet that she hadn't seen before, they'd been so concerned with it that they'd come completely forgotten to check their flank. Rookie mistake. Raina cursed the 2 more cannons, which meant that a second shot was inbound. We have to get out of here. The hull is too thick for a cannon to pierce at this distance. They can't sink us, Farley said, falling onto the upper deck with such. Overhead, Bill barked a hollow laugh. It was bleeding from several guns, undoubtedly from the spray of splinters, but none of it looked serious. He moved in swift with an Rango, and with the navigator turned to the ship, and his kids vanished below decks. I am less concerned about sinking in a river and more concerned about the debris taking our eyes. Another boom, sharp snapping sounds echoed. Less cleaner that was wiping under the sudden loss of tension. Bill clutched one of his masts, bracing himself, but at least no word shattered this time. If they get our musketed in the water, Serena said, we need to get out of bed. Drying, Rango grunted, but the welling in the helm, wrestling the helm under them, the ship launched sideways, turning into a slow circle around from the blockade, but it was too late. The 4 ships hidden around the bend had left their spots and were advancing down the river. Current. Raina counted 30 constables, maybe more, marring the decks, and she retrieved the sword from where Darlene had abandoned it. Even its familiar grip didn't give her a comfort. Fear thrummed in her veins, warring with the determination she had on Serena's gaze. Prepare to be boarded, Captain. Serena tugged at her own sword, her face pale. Chapter 20. Chianti lost track of how long they were on the tiny boat. With their magic, they had an excellent time, and the Nessian River was powerful. Ley line and so sliding up the ship with its width as easy and breathing. Occasionally, they stopped on the shoreline for food, and once midday, she visited a farmstead that boasted dried elk jerky. We set up a stand here every day. The ships always stop. Their daughter proclaimed, rubbing her the jerky in a checkered cloth. Papa says we can buy a horse if we sell enough for Joby. I don't think that much. Do you have a horse? She asked Chianti. Lilac was left in the stables and Colin almost certainly loving laugh. Chianti shook her head. I have a griffin. A griffin. The girl grasped. Papa, can we get a griffin? But the papa, the staring door at Bobby's uniform, even crumpled from days of use, missing the identifying badge. There was no mistaking that it was Constable's garb. He took the jerky from his daughter and jumped at the Chianti. We aren't doing well enough for a horse. The gruff statement came with an unspoken threat. Nothing to see here. At her side, Bobby swallowed around and muttered, I'll just wait on the boat. Chianti handed them a coin, knelt to the little girl, and whispered, keep your eyes on the sky and you might see my griffin. She ruffled through the little girl's hair, handed on the stoic father, and boarded their boat with a quick twisted magic and the back on the water, but neither of them spoke until the jerky stand was out of view. You okay, Chianti said, I want to get out of this uniform, Bobby replied numbly. They sailed into the morning, admiring the golden glow mist of the river, and they passed along huge islands. At some point, Chianti drifted to sleep, and in the relaxation by the soft swell of the wave and a burning sensation had just wrenched her back into awareness. Ow, ow, she hissed, yanking at the moonstone from her skin. It was hot, and it only got hot when they signaled from Raina emergency. And on Chianti, they go through the air. Shit, Chianti launched her feet. Fate goes into her feet. It was all too happy to oblige Carrie. Music and carried on to the complaints that being slipped, slashed to the house, grinding into a metal ball, and she stepped to the moonstone, desperately awaiting a response, but Raina must be too busy or injured to fuck. Cannon fire, Mummy leapt to the front of the boat, leaning a little scan to the ship out of the curved river was like a titanic snake, and the fuel was obscured. You can't the girl and attacked, do you? Based on the recent events, nothing would surprise me anymore. Chianti, over the railing of the boat's side, and her fingers drifting from the water magic spread along the river's ley line. Further upstream, the water cycled around through the loops, desperately trying to turn the Fawn over attackers' cars. They left her alone for 2 days, and with a sharp jerk of magic, their boat snapped forward, wind whistling against the sails, and the element themselves shoved it towards Raina. They weren't far. Another cannon echoed, and the Bobby flinched as a scream pierced the air. More than shouts accompanied it, and an army of them sounded like it, and they curved the river, banded, or what looked like it was an all-out war, or rather bullying the one ship. With no defences, and Chianti counted 5 adults on board, maybe 6. Meanwhile, 5 of their tons to best ship seemed intent on sailing it down. They were 2 armed with light cannons, and 1 was already in position. The pirate ship's 2 masts, he's going to kill her, Bobby exclaimed, horror sinking to her voice. That's what I've been trying to tell you, Chianti said. Can't wait for Mummy to Bobby handle the situation. Every moment these cannons were aimed at Serena's ship. With another moment, Raina could be killed. They hold on and wrenched the river up, encouraging it to drench to consume. The water could pretend it was fire ripping through the insanity. It soaked the ship, pushed it to constables overboard, and vessels. Watched the split of the vessel dipped itself to its side. The river was sucked with sails down, and the entire thing tilted under cannons directed to the sun itself now that Nessie and greedily devoured it. A bit too excited for Yanthe's presence, and she set a wave of soothing magic after it. The ley line pulsed with her command. The river bounded but calmed. It still left one ship with cannons, but that wasn't a big concern, not when the dozen constables were swinging onto the pirate ship. It seemed remarkably risky, with Serena's vessel turning the way that it was. A few constables overshot, landing hard in the river and sweeping downstream before they could fight it, but several did reach the deck, and there was Raina, sword gleaming in the sunlight, facing up as the light of defense. Clung of his own stake, Rain Ganthy rumbled and yanked their little boat alongside it. She pulled the wood out in strategic divots, grating a ladder straight up the side of Serena's ship. The new name got her attention, then on for sale, but they didn't have time to laugh. She launched their makeshift ladder, dimly aware that Bobby was following her, and thumped on the deck to find a sword step near her nose. Stand down and you won't be killed, the constable snarled. Cute Ganthy grabbed the air in her lungs, but before she could yank, a sword changed against her and a boot connected with her knee. And Raina moved swiftly in front of Ganthy, slamming her sword's palm with little to his skull. The constables dropped like a stone. Don't threaten my fiancé, she told his day's form. That was sexy as hell. Thank you, dear, said Raina, spun towards another approaching constable, slashing his leg, but the range certainly wasn't yellow, and he was little strange little cash. Blood and auspicious and somehow beautiful, but she moved with such deadly grace. We have to get Serena, Bobby explained. Right, replied. On the upper deck, the pirate had been thrown to the ground by another constable, and he pressed the sword into her back, and his boots applying pressure to the bandage on her arm. He already helped and throwing under it, so holding the just dug the sword enough to further snarl something. It had snarled something to her. More constables called it. That was Serena's crew, and a couple of extras were venturing below decks towards the den in nasty expressions. It was sorts of nasty expressions. Robbie had in the hands for Serena and leapt, passing out, they scaling the staircase to the upper deck and tackling the constable, threatening the pirate. He raised his sword just in time, slicing down shoulder. She helped as he withdrew, but instead of retreating, she grabbed his hand and dug her nails into until she reloaded the bloodied weapon. Until he released his hold of the bloody weapon, and nearly armed, she'd slashed and jabbed and forced him back, too far back. So far, he accidentally toppled over the railing, and Bobby barely acknowledged the splash as he hit the water. Raina, meanwhile, was fighting her own battle. She moved swiftly across the deck, riding through the comfortable stains of crimson. In her wake, she shouted the cannons. How she'd noticed that, they would never know, but she was right. The captain ship at the masts, and they went a lot closer. If they fired, others would know badly, thoroughly done them drama. They wrenched another wave over the enemy ship, but didn't manage to capsize this one, but the water's shorter, it would soak anything combustible. That took over the problem, but I don't not address to the stream of constables sleeping under their ship. They ignited her bombs and shooed the fire onto the very flammable cloth of the enemy sails. This didn't take much prodding. The fire was mostly gluttonous in his armor, and could just be gifted the feast of a full permission to eat. Shadows of anger returned to the cries of panic as ropes were due to ash, and constables' mates when crashed into the water around them. Fear feared sure towards the natural flames could devour their miles, and it left one enemy circling sails alight. Although they seemed to decide the constables on their not for sale were more in than fleeing for shore, satisfied. They turned back to the fight to relieve that Bobby wasn't very to realize that Bobby wasn't faring very well. Her fighting was decent, actually. His grace and the smooth notions of a lifetime for wielding a sword, but the next constable had entirely practiced footworks, had clearly practiced footstrokes, and she was functionally something that was more dangerous than a typical weather. Despite that, soaked from the front of her shirt and she went on her shoulder, and she was very much deeper than they thought. And although Bobby had sent her first opponent into the flinging light water, another constable thundered up the steps, and one that resembled an angry seagull. They had met before Dial, and he looked furious. Bobby staggered in front of Serena and Riley on her sword. Serena hadn't seemed pleased by that. She said something scathing, and for expression was anything to go by. She tried to pull Bobby back, but Dial seized the opportunity and lunged. Bob seized the opportunity of Serena away, and his blade wasn't prepared. The blade hit into her ribs, and her cry echoed. I have to help Bobby. They called to Raina. The fiancé was already moving over several fallen constables, and drew miracle Lodge's testament to his incredible skill. None of them seemed to be dead, most were unconscious, and a few were curled around painful injuries, but yet they got 7 or 8 stone stars. Raina was a force. I'm going to go below decks. The children are down there. Stop that fight. Raina tossed a sword to one of the newly afraid pirate crew, and then straight toward the staircase leading back to low decks. One constable clumping right up. They rolled her. Lift proved difficult. With the large cloak she wore, meanwhile, Raina vanished in the darkness, and the bloody sword gleaming in the firelight below. She'd help anyone who got in her way. Stone help anyone who got in her way. The helm dial was showing no mercy. He slashed the act and moving the fish's grace until he pinned Bobby against the links trailing traitor. He growled, I knew you were nothing in the pirate. I wasn't. Bobby's snarl, which is a risk and room, but I should have shot back dangerously. Pale, the sweat gleamed along the brow, and the black uniform was obviously slick with blood. blood shining in sunlight as she shot through their eyes. The police thought running through the wind, but she couldn't possibly separate them. Serena did something very, very stupid. She lunged at Dial and they both went crashing onto the deck. They grappled for a brief moment before Dial produced a short knife. Why did everybody ever do knives, and it drove it into the midst of Serena's legs, snapping so fast that they barely had a chance to breathe. Serena howled in the pain. Bobby launched forward. Without wasting any more time, Chianti wrenched the wood off the deck, pinning Dial's torso in her doom of his own making, and Serena rolled away. Bobby pointed her sword at his neck. Derek came to make another move. He couldn't. The fight was over for a moment. Everyone just gasped for breath. Bobby still sent below her husband than the others, and she was still standing. She left bloody footprints in her wake. His sword was stripped, but applauded Dial's neck. But with this blockade, your idea. Dial's coughed, fumbling for words. Bobby kicked the blade out of the way. Dial could help. People might have died. Dial could be mad. Did you order the blockade? It was wish that I'd give the orders to the yarn. Dial's palm that it was such an easy talk. I'm not the trader here. Once I told, I didn't give orders to you. Once I told him you were working with the pirate, Tiana took extra officer, and she's not working with me. Serena is grabbing Chianti's shoulder. You didn't let me escape. Now the pirate captain reached for the knife and embedded in her leg, but she couldn't seem to convince herself to pull it out. Probably for the best. Chianti popped Serena on the railings and approached Dial with the dangerous grace of a mage scorn. The air around her crackled, and I'm going to give you just one chance to get off this ship, and if you follow us, you'll find out what it's like to sail through a tidal wave. Is that clear? Dial admitted her. The native ages working with pirates now. The council's going the railing in one smooth. Released the wooden buttings and then knocked him over the ship's railing in one smooth move, but she didn't let him hit the water. But he didn't hit the water. Instead, a burst of air swept between the ships, tossing him unceremoniously under the neighbouring Briganti. With another wave, she quelled the fire, eating their sails. What about the others? Serena said, clustered off the lower deck. Going back to their feet, they were probably then left behind again. They grumbled, I can bundle them up in a tornado that might damage our sails. We're pirates, right? Let's make them walk the plank. Serena adjusted for a long wooden plank and then broke between the ships. Just hold the ships close like a door. They're going to drift otherwise. It was a long process, holding the constables up, quelling any lingering fighters, and then shoving them across the precarious footing board between two massive ships. Bobby stared at the helm, tending her wounds, and Serena's crew handled them in Raina's resurfaced with another pair of constables, shoving them unceremoniously onto the blood-stained deck. Your kid's a safe, Bill, she said. The man addressed was the silver-bearded sailor, chuckled. My kids aren't stupid, calls they're safe, and finally, one of the constables won. The ship had been capsized and carried downstream. Two had considered constables desperately trying to extinguish flames as they anchored at the shore. Like a rejected lover in a current, sails burned to ash. Dial himself was left glorying on his own deck, but when he shouted something, his words were magically lost to the winds. As they sailed north, Chianti flipped him off, and which Raina heaved a sigh. Like, you're the picture of professionalism. No, love, that's you, Chianti replied, pulling her into a fierce sock. Nothing up to the fight, even though they had it well enough. Thanks for not killing anyone, she whispered against Raina's sweat-slecked skin. Her fiancé smiled, and the expression was pain. Contrary to popular belief, I do not thrive on taking somebody's life. Shit, Chianti scrambled to backstab. I didn't mean, Tone caught their attention. Both Chianti and Raina glanced back at the upper deck and at the helmet where the tall, lanky sailor taking control of the massive wooden wheel. The manly woman in white, Raina was helpfully informed. Chianti was standing Serena's knife rimmed, but Serena was the other one who'd spoken, and her eyes were glued on Bobby. The ex-constable seemed to be attempting as much physical distance as possible from Serena and her crew. Bobby, who'd seen they'd been activated and soaked with blood over the course of the fight. Bobby, who'd now completely forgotten. Okay, battery power low. Before they sent Dial's constables backing up was like watching a shipwreck from the shoreline. They saw Bobby's eyes flooded the exact moment and flooded the wave, and instead of pitching forward,